So good afternoon, delegates and invitees. So now let me introduce the chair of the session, Dr. T.N. Singh. He's a professor at the Department of Earth Sciences, Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. Dr. Singh's area expertise is geomechanics, slope stability, natural hazard and blasting. He has published more than 350 research papers in different journals of repute and guided 40 PhD students. He was Vice Chancellor of Mahatma Gandhi Kashi Vidyapith, Varanasi from 2018 to 2021. Welcome, Professor T.N. Singh. And now we have the co-chair of the session, Dr. Vinod Srinivasan. He is an assistant professor at National Institute of Technology, Karnataka, Surathkal. He has over 6 years of postdoctoral experiences related to rock mechanics and engineering geology with focus on unconventional energy resources and their geomechanics. He has project experience in mining engineering on microseismic monitoring of induced seismicity for slope stability and modeling subsidence behavior and strata control prediction in deep coal mines. Postdoctoral fellow between 2015 to 27 at Indian Institute of Technology, ISM Dhanbi, Bombay. Recipient of National Postdoctoral Fellowship, Dr. Vinod Srinivasan, for this to co-chair the session. Now I'll hand over the mic to chair and co-chair. Dr. Vinod is having a resume of Professor Ghosh.
Yeah.
Please,
thank you. Thank you, Dr. Raghavir Rao and other dignitaries over here, and Honorable Chair of the session, Dr. Professor T.N. Singh, who is my mentor for my postdoc fellow. And I'm pretty excited to be the co-chair for the session along with him. And I welcome everyone over here for the 7th International Conference on Recent Advances in Geotechnical Earthquake Engineering and Soil Dynamics. So for the technical session 3 on Hall C, the special lecture, first lecture, will be given by Professor Priyanka Ghosh, Professor of Department of Civil Engineering, IIT Kanpur, on the topic seismic stability of slopes reinforced with microfiles and numerical study. And giving an introduction about Professor Ghosh. Professor Dr. Priyanka Ghosh is a professor in the Department of Civil Engineering, IIT Kanpur. After completion of PhD from IISc Bangalore in 2005, he served as a faculty member at BITS Pilani, IIT Kharagpur, and IIT Kanpur. His primary research focus is in computational and experimental geomechanics, and in particular analysis of foundations, ground anchors, retaining structures, stability of slopes, vibration isolation, and geopolymers. He is a recipient of several awards like IEA Young Engineers Award by the Institute of Engineers India, Outstanding Investigator Award by International Association for Computer Methods and Advances in Geomechanics. Warm welcome to Professor Ghosh, sir. Sir, now with the permission of chair, I invite Professor Priyanka Ghosh from IIT Kanpur to have a special lecture. Now the floor is to you, sir.
Thank you. So, only I request to just please a second.
Yes.
I only request to all the speakers that we should abide by the times, because once one session is delayed, this other will be further delayed. So I don't want that someone will claim that being a chair I have not informed. And I know that P. Ghosh is a very eminent speaker, and such kind of a speaker can control the time and deliver the things what they wanted. So with this request, I welcome again Professor Ghosh and request that you should deliver your lecture. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So thank you very much, Professor T.N. Singh and Professor Vinod Srinivasan for such a nice introduction. And first of all, I must thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to present our work in this conference. I know that how difficult it is to organize online conference, and I'm extremely grateful to the organizers. Now, with this, so myself, Priyank Ghosh, from IIT Kanpur. So today I'm going to present our work on the seismic stability of slopes reinforced with micropiles, a numerical study basically. So before going to the details of the presentation, so I would like to say this is the initiation of such work. I mean, we are still working on that. So the first model was ready. So we thought to put that thing in the conference. So, so it is, I mean, the improvement, development, and all those things are still happening. So therefore, as you can see in the presentation, that there are several assumptions. Based on that, we have done this work, and gradually we are trying to release or remove these assumptions in the subsequent improvement. So this is briefly my research interest. So I mainly work in theoretical and experimental geomechanics. So today I am going to focus on this topic, the slope stability, which is the slope is reinforced with micropiles. Now, why this topic? What has motivated us to work on this topic? Yeah. So the stability analysis of natural and human-made slopes under seismic condition remains a challenging task in the field of geotechnical engineering. So as we all know, a lot of researchers are working on the slope stability, and we know that the landslide, slope failure, embankment failure. So these are the part and parcels of a geotechnical engineer, right? The failure of slopes under any condition may lead to tremendous loss to the society, which advocates for improving the soil to enhance the stability of slopes. Out of various ground improvement techniques, there are several, like as you know, that geosynthetic reinforced ground improvement techniques, or maybe chemical stabilization based ground improvement techniques. There are several techniques, right? Now, micropiles can be adapted to enhance the stability of such slopes. So let's see how we can place it and how we can get the enhancement in the stability. So micropiles are generally found to be versatile for serving various functions such as seismic retrofitting and underpinning. The stability of slopes is expected to get improved with the use of micropiles, but the study on the effect of seismicity on the stability of micropile reinforced slope is limited. So that actually has motivated us to initiate this work. Now coming to the problem definition and objectives of the present work. So the problem definition is a finite slope of height h and inclination I, reinforced with vertical as well as inclined micropiles, is considered under static and seismic conditions. The mechanical properties of soil include the angle of internal friction of soil, cohesion, and unit weight of soil. So therefore, we considered both C and phi, both parameters. It is not purely cohesive soil slope, rather it is having both present in the soil. The limit equilibrium method, so we know that there are several numerical techniques by which we can solve or we can obtain the stability of slope. However, we have used limit equilibrium method for this study, coupled with original pseudodynamic approach, which was originally proposed by Steedman and Zeng in 1990, and later several researchers worked on that and improved the methodology. So these two things are adapted in the analysis. The slip surface is reasonably assumed to be circular, which passes through the toe of the slope. So these are all we are assuming, sir, only the slope is getting failed through the toe failure. Okay, the main objective is to determine the factor of safety of the slope reinforced with micropiles and under both static and seismic conditions. So this is the basic objective of the present. Now, coming to the failure mechanism, which was adapted for this study, and the associated forces for both vertical micropile and inclined micropile. Here you can see this is the finite slope, and this is the say slope surface. Slip surface, which is reasonably circular, we assumed. And this is the micropile. This is the vertical micropile, and in this figure, this is the inclined micropile. And the seismic inertia forces, like vertical and horizontal seismic inertia forces, are calculated based on original pseudodynamic analysis. And we considered the wave velocities like shear wave velocity and primary wave velocity. And also we considered the amplification of the seismic activities from the base of the slope to the top. Now we consider the slope is resting. So these are the assumptions. We are coming to the assumptions part. So this slope is resting on a reasonably rigid layer, and the height of the slope is h, capital H. This is also finite. Now coming to the assumptions, as I told you, so this is the initial work we started. So therefore, to start with something, so we need to have little more assumptions, and we are working on the relaxation of these assumptions in the subsequent works. So the shear modulus of soil is assumed to be constant throughout the height of the slope. The length of micropiles is considered to be uniform and always intersects the slip surface. The resistance of the pile cap is not considered in the analysis, and the micropile is assumed to be a fixed head pile. Location of the micropile is assumed at the top of the slope. Allowable displacement at the ground line is assumed 10% of the pile diameter for the computation of lateral capacity, because we need to find out, or need to obtain the capacity of the micropile, which will be included in the analysis. So therefore, we need to assume something regarding the serviceability of the micropiles. The micropile is assumed to be driven by type A driven. Now coming to the methodology. So we calculate the seismic accelerations based on the OPT approach proposed by Steedman and Zeng in 1990. So we considered the horizontal acceleration through this expression and the vertical acceleration through this expression. Now here, if we remove the amplification factor FA, or if we remove the time dependency of the wave, so it will be boiling down to the pseudostatic approach, which is quite well known in the community, right? So through these two equations, we calculated the horizontal and vertical seismic accelerations, and which were included in the analysis. Now coming to the stability analysis with vertical micropile. So the detailed derivations I am not going to show here. That is available in the paper. So interested people can see or can refer the paper for getting the derivations. However, by considering the equilibrium of forces, the factor of safety can be expressed by this expression, where you are having the soil resistance, you are having the micropile resistance, and you are having the seismic forces, inertia forces, and the weight of the soil chunk or the soil wedge, which will be disturbing the slope stability. Now coming to the inclined micropiles, though everything is remaining same, only thing is that the lateral calculation of the lateral force in the inclined micropiles is a bit different. So that we have taken from Murthy and Subbarao 1995 paper, and based on that we determined the lateral capacity of the micropile, and then after getting the reasonable expression for P axial and P lateral for the micropiles, then the same equation, whatever I have just shown in the previous slide for the vertical micropiles. So by calculating the values, suitable values for the inclined micropiles, we can use the previous expression for getting the factor of safety. Now coming to the results part. So this is the range of input parameters used in the study, which are given in this table. So I mean this table is basically giving us the parametric study or the library of the parametric study. Now coming to the results, the variation of factor of safety with KH is nothing but the horizontal acceleration, seismic acceleration coefficient. For a slope with vertical micropiles is presented in the following figure, and it can be seen that the factor of safety decreases significantly with an increase in the magnitude of the acceleration, which is quite obvious, because as seismic acceleration increases, your factor of safety should go down and it decreases, and you can see that it is getting affected significantly. Now, we have put two limiting conditions like seismic factor of safety limiting values and static factor of safety limiting values, and these two values are taken from FHWA, that is Federal Highway Organization, as per their proposal. So we have put that so that it can give you some idea that, okay, so beyond this limit, actually everything is safe under static condition, or everything is said to be safe. However, under seismic condition, you can still go a little below, and this is the limit for the seismic condition. So to give you some kind of reference. So this is for different values of phi. This is also for different values of phi, but we are having different values of seismic acceleration. Now coming to the variation of factor of safety with L by H. L is nothing but the length of the micropile, and H, as I told you, this is the height of the slope. And for different values of phi and theta b. What is theta b? Theta b is the batter angle. That is nothing but the, in case of inclined micropile, theta b will be different. However, when theta b is 0, that means this is the vertical micropile. Okay, and negative theta b means it is the rotation of, or the angle between the micropile axis and the vertical axis is theta b in the clockwise direction. Okay, so this is the meaning of the negative theta b and positive theta b. Anyway, so that is also given in the paper, so you can refer to the paper to get the sign convention for the theta b. So anyway, it can be observed that the factor of safety increases with an increase in the magnitude of L by H ratio, that you can see as L by H increases. That means as the length of the micropile increases, you are getting higher factor of safety. And for different values of phi, it is the difference is significant. However, it is not that much significant in case of theta b, when theta b is rotating in the clockwise direction. That means from the vertical axis, it is rotating in the clockwise direction. That means towards the slope face. At that time, your factor of safety is getting decreased. Okay. However, if it is going towards the top surface, your factor of safety is increasing. That you can see from here. Now, coming to the variation of factor of safety with KH for different values of H by lambda and H by eta. These are two seismic parameters. H we all know by this time, and lambda and eta, basically lambda is nothing but T, capital T into Vp. That is where capital T is the period of shaking and Vp is the primary wave velocity. Similarly, eta is TVS, where T is the period and Vs is the shear wave velocity. Now, basically, H by lambda and H by eta, what do they represent? They represent the time taken by the shear wave and the primary wave to travel from the base to the top of the slope. Okay, so that means if H by lambda increases, that means time taken by the waves to reach from the base to the top surface of the slope is more. That is the meaning of increment in the H by lambda and H by eta. Now, it can be observed that the factor of safety increases with an increase in the magnitude of H by lambda and H by eta, right? So, factor of safety increases with increment of H by lambda. That means if the seismic waves travel faster, your factor of safety goes down. If it takes a little bit more time to reach to the top surface, so in that condition, your factor of safety increases. Now, coming to the variation of factor of safety with the slope angle. Okay, and here also the trend is very similar, as already other researchers have already obtained. But however, we quantified that thing. So as your slope angle increases, that means as the slope is becoming stiffer, your factor of safety decreases, which is quite obvious actually. This is the obvious observation, but we quantified the value that how much decrement or how much enhancement is happening with the variation of the slope, and of course with the use of micropile. Now, coming to the next result part, that is the variation of factor of safety for different values of amplification factor. that means FA. Okay, so here we can see that factor of safety decreases with an increase in the magnitude of FA, that you can see. So FA is 1, 1.2, 1.4, 1.6, because this amplification factor depends on so many factors, right? Ground condition, soil condition, and type of shaking, everything, right? So anyway, but we have only chosen the coefficient. So we didn't, these values have not been selected from some site-specific case, okay? Anyway, so as we can see that as FA increases, your factor of safety decreases. Now again, coming to the batter angle, here you can see that as your batter angle increases, that means from negative to positive it is going, your factor of safety decreases. That means if the inclined micropile coming near to the top surface to the slope surface, your factor of safety is decreasing. So initially it remains almost constant, and then now this is a variation of factor of safety for different values of micropile diameter. And of course, I can tell you, we didn't assume the inertia force of the micropile. So therefore, we restricted only in between 0.23 to 0.27 of the diameter of the micropiles. We can go little higher diameter of the micropile, but in that case, we cannot ignore the inertia force of the micropile itself. So that's why we restricted here. So we are working on this to include the inertia force of the micropile in the analysis in the future studies. So anyway, here you can see as diameter increases, your factor of safety increases. Now coming to the comparison, of course, we need to compare, but unfortunately we didn't get the proper comparison with the micropile reinforced slope under seismic condition. And that actually restricted us to compare our present results without micropile. And of course, we compared with the very basic and conventional seismic analysis, that is pseudostatic analysis. And here we compared with Chaudhary et al. 2007, and we can see that the present results is found to be little higher. It is giving little higher factor of safety than the Chaudhary et al. Because we all know that pseudostatic gives the conservative results and hence safe results, of course. But this will be always giving you the conservative side. So that is getting reflected from this figure, and this is the values for, or the variation of the factor of safety for different values of say phi, but under static time. Now coming to the summary part. So I am not going to say conclusion because the work is still going on. So we are not in a position to tell about the final conclusions of the work. But anyway, so we can summarize our work, whatever we have presented just now. So the factor of safety for a slope reinforced with micropiles decreases with an increase in the magnitude of kh and kv. The factor of safety for a slope reinforced with micropiles increases with an increase in the length of micropiles. The magnitude of factor of safety decreases with an increase in FA, that is amplification factor, but increases with an increase in h by lambda and h by eta. That means time taken by the waves to travel from the base of the slope to the top of the slope. Under both static and seismic condition, an increase in the diameter of micropiles from 0.23 meter to 0.27 meter results around 3% higher factor of safety. Under the seismic condition, inclined micropiles are found to be more effective than vertical micropiles. That already we have observed. The factor of safety generally decreases with an increase in the batter angle of micropiles. We observed that thing. The factor of safety for a slope reinforced with micropiles is found to be conservative for the pseudostatic approach compared to the original pseudodynamic approach. Now I acknowledge the work was done by our previous MTech student, Mr. Surya Kumar Pandey, and in collaboration with my colleague, Professor S. Rajesh. Now, thank you very much for your questions, listening. So, is there any question?
Thank you, Professor Ghosh. Yeah, it was indeed a very nice presentation.
Professor Ghosh, very interesting presentation. But in all these cases, it appears what is the saturation condition of any saturation or wetting due to rainfall or anything?
Yeah, so we at this moment we didn't consider any water actually. Water soil interaction we didn't consider. So if we consider that thing, we need to obtain the excess pore water pressure. All those things will be coming or will be disturbing the stability, of course. So that we didn't consider at this moment. So that is another assumption that we. I mean, in this particular slope, we considered everything is in the dry condition and there is no interaction of water at this moment. However, I mean, that is another say scope of study. I mean, we can include water and we can see how pore pressure is affecting the stability. Of course, yes.
Yeah, because it
But
is
at this moment,
very highly.
in this study we didn't consider.
Yeah, it is highly impossible to maintain them in that condition.
Yeah.
For a long period of time.
True.
So naturally, the factor of safety will be varying.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Without water, I mean, see, water is of course, I mean, the part. So there is no other way to avoid the water. Water will be coming, and that will be seriously affecting the stability. So, but in this study, we didn't consider. But another thing we didn't consider, which is, if you see this study, we considered only single micropile. That means a line series of micropile in the two-dimensional plane strain. But that is not the actual case in the field. We generally go for several micropiles to stabilize the slope. So that's why I told you. So this is the initial initiation of this work. Maybe we can work more on this part, and we can get some improved model to capture this stability. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Ghoshak, can I have just one small out of interest? So how about the cost component in installation of both inclined and vertical, and about the risk factor in the actual conditions? Cost components, like the feasibility, economical feasibility, is there any cost component involved? Like
cost
difference, yeah. Hello?
Yeah, see, generally what people do, micropiles are generally used. I mean, if I can use the micropiles used with one vertical, one batter, generally. So here we consider only, in case of vertical, only vertical, and in case of inclined, only we consider the inclined. But frankly speaking, in practical situation, we generally go for the combination, so that we'll be getting more stability. Because in case of slope stability, what happens, you need more lateral resistance from the micropile. And lateral resistance will be only coming or only enhanced because of your better micropile. So then only you'll be getting more lateral resistance. So these are the things, I mean, we didn't study at this moment. So, and cost component wise, I think there is, I mean, if your length of micropile is increasing, of course, your cost will be more. But if you increase the diameter of the micropile more, as we have seen already at this moment, we have varied the diameter, but the variation is not coming much. But if we consider more robust micropile, that means the diameter, if it is becoming more, but in that case, we need to consider the inertia force of the micropile itself in the analysis. So then maybe your study will be more affected, or the stability of the slope will be more affected by the inertia force of the micropile itself. Then the diameter effect will be more, visible, or the more effective.
Sir, we got one question. I'll just read out the thing. Like, thanks for the interesting presentation. How do you think the assumption of constant shear modulus influences the results of the current study?
Okay, a very good question actually. Yeah, so frankly speaking, in seismic analysis, shear modulus doesn't remain constant. But you know, as I told you, from somewhere you have to start. In this seismic approach, hydrodynamic approach, we can vary the shear modulus, and that work has been done by people. Okay, by varying the shear modulus. Even Steedman and Zhang themselves, they did it actually by varying the shear modulus. But if you vary the shear modulus, what will happen? Your analysis will be very complicated. Then you cannot consider the continuum. Then you have to discretize the thing, and you have to consider the variation of the shear modulus itself. It could be exponential variation, it could be linear variation, whatever. But that will complicate your analysis too much. So we are working on that. And that is not that very straightforward analysis, whatever we have discussed just now. It will be a little complicated, but it can be done, and it should be done. It should be done because shear modulus cannot be constant under seismic conditions.
Yes, sir. There is no more questions. So thank you, Professor Ghosh, for such an interesting and nice presentation, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Sir.
Thanks to all.
Thank you. Dr. Rao, sir, can we move on to the paper presentations? Yeah, with the permission from chair, now we would like to move on to the paper presentations. We have 4 papers will be presented today here in this session. The first one, the title of the paper is Centrifuge Modeling of Marginal Soil Slopes Under Rainfall with Hybrid Geosynthetic Inclusions. That will be presented by Deepankana Bhattacharjee, Indian Institute of Engineering, Science and Technology, Shivpur, India. And I now leave the floor to Deepankana.
Thank you so much. A very good afternoon to all the participants and all the delegates present on and off the virtual dais.
Ma'am, just a minute. Before you start your presentation, please take about 8 to 10 minutes for the presentation, and it will be followed by the question and answers.
Surely, I can see the time. That's not a problem. I'll keep it track. Thank you. So I'm going to be presenting on centrifuge modeling of marginal soil slopes under rainfall with hybrid geosynthetic inclusions. It's a part of my doctoral research work, which I had undertaken in IIT Bombay under the supervision of Professor Vishwanathan. I'm presently serving as an assistant professor in the Department of Civil Engineering of Indian Institute of Engineering, Science and Technology, Shivpur. So this is the layout of my presentation. I'll be briefly introducing the concept of marginal soils, the concept of hybrid geosynthetic, and what was the improvement in the slope stability aspects under rainfall with and without hybrid geosynthetic inclusions. So just to bring out the research relevance, nowadays with the advent of global warming and associated climatic changes, the environment has been affected very, very adversely, as a result of which the frequency of hydrometeorological disasters have increased significantly. This has led to a lot of incidents being reported on the instability of natural and engineered soil slopes and wats. Specifically in case of hilly terrain, if we look at the data of the Himalayan regions, there the frequency of rainfall triggered landslides, the corresponding fatalities, the infrastructural damages are huge, which definitely brings out the relevance of the research problem. These are some of the statistical compilation from agencies like CRAD, which is the database for which compiles international and national disaster databases. Secondly, we have a couple of pictures also which highlights the huge infrastructural facilities that were happening. And many a times it has been reported that these instabilities were attributed solely due to rainwater infiltrating in an otherwise stable slope, which was structurally stable. Simply due to rainwater infiltration, some kind of an instability was initiated. These are some recent fatalities which happened due to cloudburst conditions in Uttarakhand. Then frequently, always in the monsoon seasons, Mumbai region experiences a lot of landslides. So if we try to look into the basic failure mechanism of an unreinforced slope, what happens is that as the matrix suction reduces, matrix suction meaning the zone which is above the water table, as the soil matrix suction slowly reduces with the progress of the infiltration front, we see the cases of slope instability triggering instantaneously. Specifically, if the fill material which is used in reinforced earth construction has marginal permeability, marginal meaning say 10 to the power minus 6 and less, that is a low to marginal permeability, then the problem aggravates a lot. Why? Because nowadays, we do not have permeable good quality granular material. One, though it's scarce. Secondly, it's very expensive. So we have to make the use of on-site locally available soils, which are usually having marginal to low permeability. So my project was aimed at finding a sort of a mitigation technology wherein we can cater to those problem of scarcity of good quality permeable soil by accommodating those marginal soils. At the same time, can we think of an alternative mitigation methodology? So what we aimed at, we tried to use an innovative synthetic material, which is, we all know about geosynthetics. These are green sustainable materials, but usually geosynthetics perform only one dedicated function. We try to combine the reinforcement potential of a geogrid with the drainage potential of a geotextile, resulting in a kind of a composite material, which we named herein as a hybrid geosynthetic. So we have combined basically the reinforcement potential of a geogrid, which is shown here, with the drainage potential of a geotextile. Now, when we did a literature review, what we found is people have done a lot of studies on geogrid reinforced slopes under rainfall and geotextile reinforced slopes under rainfall. What happens if we are coupling them? Are we getting any additional benefit? Is it economical? So that way we try to search different prototype available geogrid and geotextile for commercially available different prototype materials. We try to sandwich them, combine them, and accordingly see the improved characteristics on slope stability. We have used centrifuge-based physical modeling technique as a modeling tool in order to replicate identical stress strain conditions in the centrifuge model as well as that of the prototype. I'm not getting into too details of centrifuge modeling. It's a very sophisticated tool, but there are standard scaling laws by means of which we can scale rather extrapolate the model behavior to that of the corresponding prototype. So the scaling has to be done as far as the geosynthetic material is concerned with respect to its transmissivity characteristics, which is attributed to the geotextile, as well as the reinforcement characteristics, which is attributed to the geogrid. Identical transmissivity has to be maintained. Similarly, the tensile stiffness has to be scaled, as well as the rainfall characteristics, like I have shown here, the prototype rainfall when we are simulating at high gravity levels in the centrifuge, that also needs to be scaled appropriately, like it has been shown here. Experimental investigations were done before starting the centrifuge modeling. What is the drainage characteristic of my hybrid geosynthetic? What is the tensile load characteristics of my hybrid geosynthetic? Secondly, the soil model, the soil that I have chosen as my model soil, it exhibits a percentage fine of about 20 and a permeability of about 10 to the power minus 6. I blended sand with kaolin to arrive at this proportion, so it fits into my definition of marginal soil. I had to design a rainfall simulator which specially designed these pneumatic nozzles, because these pneumatic nozzles, they combine an interaction of air and water internally so as to create a mist. Unless mist is created, what happened was a lot of runoff was happening. I was not exactly getting the desired infiltration into the slope. These are the various stages involved in the process. I'm not going into the very details. This is the results and interpretation part. As we can see, the top model represents the unreinforced slope, which had a catastrophic failure. The rainfall that I simulated was 20 mm per hour, which fits into the characteristic of a moderate to heavy rainfall. My simulator could simulate rainfall from 2 mm per hour to as high as a cloudburst condition of 80. We stuck to the middle range of 20 mm per hour here. We can see a kind of a toe failure for the unreinforced slope, a catastrophic failure just within about, in prototype dimension I'm extrapolating, so it's about 9.37 days, close to that. Whereas even when monitored up to a substantial time of 24 days, beyond which no more pore water pressure increase was recorded by the instrumentation, which is pore pressure transducers, neither any additional slope displacement occurred. So that ultimate point was about 24.5 days as shown here. The slope is still stable without any initiation of cracking. We use pore pressure transducers for monitoring the pore pressure buildup, and simultaneously we used different plastic markers to serve as image analysis. We used to track the coordinates of the plastic markers so as to find what are the surface settlements and the corresponding phase movements. So same in case of the surface settlements, we can see that the surface settlements are drastic in case of the unreinforced slope. A 3.5 meter means it has undergone a total catastrophic failure, whereas the geotextile, the geogrid component and the geotextile component together could mitigate the slope instability, and just a meagre amount of settlements happened, the surface settlements. Similarly, if we track the coordinates of the plastic markers embedded within the slope phase, that is also revealing that the displacements could be reduced drastically as compared to that of the unreinforced slope. So we have monitored the pore pressure aspects as well as the deformation aspects. And these are the pore pressure buildup, which is monitored by means of the PPTs, which is placed above the slope base. In this case, I should mention that we had an initial water table, which was maintained by a seepage tank before the onset of the rainfall. So a huge pore water pressure increase has occurred for the unreinforced slope, whereas that could be mitigated. Almost a 66% decrease could be observed on the right-hand side for the hybrid geosynthetic slope. So these are my major conclusions: that the unreinforced slope model experienced a catastrophic failure followed by increasing poor water pressure with rainfall. On the contrary, the hybrid geosynthetic reinforced slope was stable throughout the rainfall event, and stable means both in terms of poor water pressure buildup as well as deformation aspects. And the finding is useful in the sense that we can cater or we can make use of locally available on-site soils, which is economical as far as the project is concerned, provided we are mitigating it, like we are introducing hybrid geosynthetics or such kind of innovative materials within the slope. Thus, we can avoid the unsustainable overmining of natural sand deposits, which is presently in the Indian guidelines also. They are putting some laws and regulations on excessive sand overmining. Thank you so much. I hope I have catered to the time requirement. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Dr. Devendra. Actually, thanks for restricting very well within the time. And let me check it out if we have any questions.
Sure.
Sir, can I have one question with your kind permission?
Yeah, sure, sir, sure.
So my question is that heavy rainfall, okay, mostly in the case of monsoon seasons and other things, already you have reported regarding the section characteristics of soil also. But what about the deep-rooted soil mass with respect to the various stratifications that have undergone with respect to the wetting and drying cycles, and how you are trying to model those wetting and drying cycles with respect to the permeability characteristics of the geotextile which you have provided?
Exactly.
How you are assigning those compatibility?
There are two aspects here, if I've understood your question correctly. One is the saturated, unsaturated aspect of the model soil. Another is the saturated, unsaturated aspect of the geosynthetic also that has been incorporated. So it is definitely the permeability characteristics. We cannot give a single case sat. The permeability, there will be a permeability curve with respect to matrix suction. When I'm modeling it in centrifuge, let me clarify at first, I do not have to undertake, I do not have to feed a numerical curve of how the matrix suction will change with the rainfall conditions. That is the advantage of physical modeling. Whatever is whatever is happening, I'm just observing it in front of my eyes, and I have instrumentation which can replicate that. But when you're asking, ma'am, how am I monitoring, then maybe you are talking about the numerical modeling part. So if I'm trying to replicate the same thing numerically, then I have to give two unsaturated curves. One is the unsaturated curve, or the SWCC, the soil water characteristic curve of my model soil, where the volumetric water content of the soil should change with the matrix suction. Secondly, the permeability of the soil should also change with matrix suction. It should be a cyclic, it should be a non-linear kind of a curve. Similarly, the same thing I have to replicate for my hybrid geosynthetic also. So the hybrid geosynthetic derives its permeability and drainage primarily from the geotextile parent component. So I can, for the parent geotextile component, I have to again develop different unsaturated curves depending upon the grain size distribution of the soil and taking into account different boundary effects. There are certain boundary effects also in this regard. If this is the diameter of the model soil, then at least this should be the scaling of the geosynthetic. Likewise, taking into that, I have to again develop unsaturated curves. So there were standard literatures available when we undertook the numerical modeling. And accordingly, yes, we did develop this kind of graphs and undertake a numerical modeling also. Definitely, it will not be a saturated case. The entire thing is unsaturated based.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Deepakana, for the clarification. And yeah,
Thank you,
I
sir.
think with due permission from Chair, TN sir, can we move on to the next paper?
Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. So we'll be moving on to our next paper presentation, paper ID 831. The title of the paper, Study on Earth Pressure Distribution and Displacements of Narrow Reinforced Earth Wall Under Static and Cyclic Loading. That will be presented by Manish V. Shah, LD College of Engineering, India. I now request Mr. Manish V. Shah to please present your paper.
Good afternoon to all the organizers and dear participants. On behalf of LD Engineering College, I myself, Dr. M. V. Shah, is going to present this paper. Sorry, already I had requested organizers that due to some net issues and as well as some my laptop issues, I will not share my presentation with you. So with your humble permission, or I will just have my verbal presentation. Already I have the paper with me. The basic reason behind presenting this paper was to float the idea of the, or I would say the concept of flexibility and rigidity. That is, I'm talking with reference to the displacements. Mostly we have monitored in case of reinforced earth wall that the displacements, particularly at the panel level, are either minimum or at zero level. Mostly it's a condition of zero displacement only. So, but when we go for this narrow reinforced earth wall, because in case of narrow reinforced earth wall, generally already one wall is present, which may be little steep or it may not be steep, or either there may be a rock surface or there may be an open cut also, or some other type of surface through which you are trying to provide the stability to your narrow reinforced earth wall. So in that case, always there is a question of the length of reinforcement. This is the one aspect. Second aspect is the stress strain distribution, or also I can say the stress distribution going with respect to the reinforcement which we are providing, and also the connections that I'm providing with respect to the existing wall, and also and with respect to the new wall. So here, I don't know whether my paper is with you or not, but if in my paper, if you refer to the figure number 3 and figure number 2, where we have prepared a physical model in which our front wall is the flexible, is our new reinforced earth wall, and the back wall is the existing wall. Now here two concepts we have floated. One is the flexible and second is the rigid. Here the flexible means the back wall through which I am providing my reinforcement or through which I am tying my reinforcement, that I have made flexible and I am allowing some particular amount of displacement. This amount of displacement we have calculated with respect to the strain characteristics of the geomaterial or the strain characteristics of the fill material, which I am placing along the back wall. This is one aspect. Second aspect, and when I am going for the rigid wall, means I am not allowing any movement of the back wall. Only the front wall, that is the new reinforced earth wall, is moving, and that will be with respect to the stress strain characteristics of the reinforcement or the geogrid which I have provided. So here, in this case, we have provided the uniaxial geogrid of 40 kN per meter capacity. So second thing, the second concept means what I would like to use the word, that to what extent the flexibility of the, means to what extent the advantage of the flexibility of the back material or of the existing wall or of the existing rock surface or whatever material, infill material that I am providing, what advantage maximum I can take so that I can minimize my other displacement, means that the outer displacement which is actually going to take place because of the new vertical loads, in whether it is in the form of the vehicular loads or any other multiple loads. So when we did the experimental analysis using these two concepts, taking the advantage of the stress strain characteristics of the backfill of the existing wall or the existing geomaterial or existing rock surface, and second, making it rigid, means with no displacement in both under static loading and cyclic loading, then our major conclusion was that yes, if the stress strain, if we are able to take the advantage of the stress strain characteristics of the backfill material. Here backfill material means only the wall which is existing, or the material of the means wall which is made up of the particular material, or even the open rock surface. Then if the stress strain characteristics of those material can be postulated in the form of the geogrid interaction with respect to the soil present. In our present case, we have used a poorly graded sand. Then definitely the displacements can be minimized to a very great level. And another advantage will be that we did not worry too much about the failure of the front wall, that is the new wall which I am going to construct, because no doubt there are many limitations which FHWA and other manuals have provided with respect to the front displacements. Okay, so if anyhow, if I am able to transfer those displacements around the back of the wall, taking into consideration the interaction that is going to take place within those geomaterials, then definitely this model or this concept will be highly advantageous. And that is the reason that we did the test on both the side, that is on static side as well as on the cyclic side. So that is what just I wanted to say regarding this my papers. No doubt I have not presented any PPTs here, so I hope it will be difficult little bit, but my email is there, and already if anybody has the paper with them or anybody can refer the paper, opening the paper, then definitely the questions are welcome or any discussions are welcome. So this is all about from my side. I'm sorry that I could not present my PPT due to some reasons, but just I wanted to float this idea which on which we are working since last many years regarding the flexibility of the existing walls as well as the flexibility of the new walls which we are going to construct along with the other walls. Mostly we have seen that the lateral earth, the displacement measurements. So here our idea also was the same, that we are trying to convert the displacements into the lateral earth pressure quantity because due to some limitations we will not have the lateral the earth pressure cells with us, and that was the reason that we tried to convert the displacements into lateral earth pressure. But main idea which was that how we can take the advantage of the material, of the existing material or the existing connections through which I'm constructing my new wall, so that my new wall doesn't go under high deformations, or my new wall or the new panel means the new wall panel doesn't go to the extreme displacements and both under static loading and cyclic loading, and also my rotational stability will not be much what I would say disturbed because of the these conditions. So in case of this flexibility approach, this advantage we could very easily see when we were measuring the displacements, also when we had tried to measure or we have tried to check the failure of the new walls as well as the failure of the existing walls. So this is all about the some concept which I want to float. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I hope organizers as well as the listeners got my idea what I want to say.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Manish sir, actually for the talk. Actually, we can say that it's a talk rather than it's a
it's a talk.
Unfortunately, we couldn't. Yeah. Unfortunately, we couldn't have your presentation this time. And so coming on to the question and answers, I'm just checking if we have any questions, and yeah, we don't have any questions for the paper. So we thank you for your time, and with due permission from chair, we are just moving on to our third paper. That'll be on seismic pull load capacity of stripe plate anchors embedded in sandy slopes by Mr. Sunil Kuntia, NIT Rourkela, Odisha. Now may I request Mr. Sunil Kuntia to, hello.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome all the dignitaries and audiences present here. And here, myself, Dr. Sunil Kuntia, currently working as Assistant Professor NIT Rourkela. And my topic here is seismic pull-out capacity of strip plate anchors embedded in sandy slopes. And my co-author in this paper is Dr. J.P. Sahu, who is Associate Professor at IIT Kanpur. So I'll move to the next slide. So before going to this topic, we should know where the application of these anchor plates. Usually there are some structures where due to lateral loading, there will be application of, due to this lateral loading, the uplift forces will act on the foundations. For some examples, these are like transmission towers and pipelines underwater. There we need to provide the anchor plates. So now the question is, these anchor plates can be applicable in lots of situations. So corresponding to my topic, Due to rapid urbanization, we are moving now towards the construction in the hilly regions where we will find the sloping ground, and also the like transmission towers usually set up near the embankments, which are also roughly these are also sloping grounds. So there we have to calculate the uplift resistance. Means we know the lateral load capacity due to the wind effect and those things. What are the loads are coming, and we have to resist that one. That is called the uplift resistance, which is provided by the anchor plates. Now, very few studies has been done in sloping areas under the presence of seismic bodies, like some sites in earthquake prone areas, like in northeast regions and some parts of eastern India. And also there are certain things we'll see in this discussion, that the anchor plate orientation also affects a lot to the capacity, that resistance capacity, that also we are going to see. So here in the study, we'll see the effect of anchor plates which are placed in the sloping ground, and there is a presence of seismic or earthquake load, and there we are varying the anchor orientation. So next, what is the methodology which has been adopted here? That is the lower bound finite element limit analysis. We know that finite element limit analysis has two theorems, that is upper bound and lower bound. In upper bound, what happens? There the load whatever will get, that will be the maximum which it can take. Means beyond that it is not possible. Okay, and in lower bound, what will happen? And that is the safe means the exact value, what, because in some problems where we are having critical loading, critical dimensions, that it is not possible to do analytically or also in experimental way. So there we use the numerical methods. And here in the lower bound, what happens? If you know the exact value, whatever the result you will get in lower bound, that will be always in the safer side. That means it will be like 1 to 2% less than the exact or true value. And also there is a factor that depends on the situation or condition. Means what are the condition you have taken, because field condition may be different and this numerical condition may be different. So here the objective function, the term objective function we say in the numerically, but in reality if you see, this is nothing, this is one type of that load, and that load has to be maximized subjected to certain constraints, that is equilibrium equations and the boundary conditions, yield condition. And here we have used the yield condition, Moore Coulomb yield criteria, and the seismic body force have to be applied here in this equation, equilibrium equation. Kh is the horizontal seismic coefficient. And so this is the problem definition. We have seen there are three orientations, one horizontal, one is parallel to the sloping face, and one vertical. So the definition is we have represented in a non-dimensional form, that is your uplift resistance factor, that is PU, that is seismic uplift capacity of anchor plate divided by gamma BH. So non-dimensional means you can use everywhere it is. So this in the right side, you can see this is a finite element mesh. So next we'll see, these are the first validation we have done with previous literatures. You can see the dark line, that is the lower bound, and Bhattacharya and Kumar, they are also non-linear lower bound they have used. So we have used non-linear, that's why the accuracy is more. And Kumar has done by using upper bound. Here you can see clearly that value of lower bound always lower than this one. So the first graph is for horizontal ground, second one is for sloping ground. Next is first we have to see what is the effect of anchor roughness. In the two diagrams also you can see in the presence of seismic force, different embedment depths. You can see there is a large variation of in the rough and smooth anchor. So this one the triangle is for 90 degrees. This is vertical. You can say vertical anchor, you will see a high amount of deviation. For horizontal, there will be very less deviation, and for parallel, that is there is almost no variation you can observe. So for due to this reason, whatever the calculation we have considered, that we have considered for smooth anchor plate, so that we will get a conservative value. So these are the results. In the result section, you can see H by B. This H by B is the embedment depth, means the depth of the anchor plate. So with the increase of this one, embedment depth, the magnitude gradually increases. Also, the three graphs, one is 520, second is 530 and 540. There also you can see due to the increase of this phi value, the magnitude increases with respect to the increase in phi value. Another one here you can see the KH value, the due to the horizontal earthquake acceleration, the factor, due to this increase, you can see there is a reduction in the magnitude of uplift factor, uplift resistance factor. And simultaneously, you can see due to the increase in slope angle. Suppose in the figure 2, figure B here, for beta 15 and beta 25, due to the increase in angle of slope, there is a reduction in the uplift resistance factor. So this you can also able to see for this is for horizontal anchors. So in the last diagram, you can see there is some magnitude of this F gamma S nearly about 7. So this is for parallel anchors. So the similar trend you can observe. So we can remember this one also in the last diagram. See, the magnitude is roughly around 7. So here you can see the vertical anchor plate. Here the behavior is almost similar, but in this for an idea, you can see here in figure C, this magnitude is nearly around this 12. So you can see the orientation has a large effect. So in case of vertical plate anchors, you will find the highest amount of uplift resistance, and other behaviors will be similar. So we need to know the what is the trend it is going to follow for this analysis you have done. So in conclusion, you can see the uplift capacity or pull-out resistance has been found to be maximum for vertical plate anchors, and the orientation, the effect, there is a negligible effect we have seen in case of parallel anchor plates to the sloping surface, and there are very high deviation in the high effect of this anchor roughness in case of vertical anchor plate, and intermediate will be for horizontal anchor plate. Then another thing we have seen, due to the increase of this one embedment depth and the phi value, we can see there is also increase in the pull-out resistance, and slope effect, due to the increase in slope, there is a further reduction in the uplift resistance. So these are the outputs of this research work. So these are some selected references. Thank you. If you have any query, you can ask.
Thank you, Dr. Sunil, for it's actually a precise and nice presentation. Now I'll just look if we have any queries. I'll check out if we have any queries. Yeah. So we don't have any queries for the. So any other anyone like to have any questions? Okay.
Because it's an interesting topic. Numerical modeling is now very famous topic nowadays.
Okay. So yeah. I think we can move on to the next paper. Paper number 938 will be on integrating landslide and seismic hazards, a case study from Lower Himalaya, Indian Himalaya by Dr. Rituraj Nath, Assam Downtown University, India.
Thank you, everyone. I would like to thank the chair and co-chair of the session for giving me the opportunity to present this work on where we are proposing new methods, and in fact, it is an engineered method of the already existing one for integrating landslide and seismic hazard. And the case study we are presenting for a part of Lower Indian Himalaya. And this paper, I'm Dr. Rituraj Nath, and I'm currently working as an assistant professor in Assam Downtown University, Guwahati. So we all know that any outward and downward movement of the slope material, you can term this as a landslide, although there exists a wider variety or wider sphere of terms and definition. This one remains one of the most acceptable one, which was proposed by the USGS in 1984. So as we see that the trans-Himalayan states, and along with the Northeast India and the Western Ghat and part, all this Indian part subcontinent is very, very susceptible to landslide hazard to various degrees.
Now, because of the landslide hazards are fatal in the Himalayan region, and it is costing India at an projection of INR 1,000 to 1,500 crore rupees per year due to the loss of infrastructures. The national guidelines on landslide hazard zonation has been drafted since 1998 when we had the GIS and the BIS codes for landslide, microzonation as well as macrozonation. So in 2009, national guidelines on landslide and snow avalanches has been drafted, and based on that, the national vision on landslide has been decided as mitigating the risk emanating through landslide hazards from through landslide hazard zonation mapping. So they have emphasized on hazard zonation mapping, and they have also accentuated on integrating multi-hazards, especially seismic and landslide hazards, considering that all trans-Himalayan states are equally vulnerable to the earthquakes as well. Now, seismically earthquake landslide hazards presents an unique scenario due to the complex mechanism and the enormity of the hazard. We can see from this particular photographs the pre-earthquake Hokkaido 2018 and the post-earthquake Hokkaido 2018, and we can see that the widespread number of landslide caused by the earthquake were almost the one particular aspect of the slope has been eroded. Similarly, the 2006 Ecuador earthquake, this is a very enormous or catastrophic landslide hazard, and the same with the Chichi earthquake of 1999. More recently, on Sikkim earthquake, where a lot of post-seismic landslide hazards has been observed, we have observed that the landslides not only activate new landslides, like we can see that the newer landslide has been reported, as well as it has reactivated the old landslides. Here we can see that the old landslides from post D1, which has been reactivated or which has reactivated on a larger scale. So the Himalayan region, which is very seismically vulnerable and which has been by Nadim et al. In 2006, they have identified Himalaya as one of the 6 hotspots for earthquakes and landslide. We have taken this Garhwal Himalayan part, and I will discuss about it later. And we can see that the earthquake swarms and as well as landslide swarms, which we have mapped throughout our study. This Himalayan collision zone, the Garhwal part, is an extraordinary segment because it kind of behaves like a decollectment, and because of these high transitory stresses, it is very important that we map the seismic landslides and we actually find out the the potential of a future earthquake-induced landslides. Why seismically induced landslides are so important? The losses due to seismically induced landslides are generally more than those caused directly due to shaking. Out of all earthquake-related casualties, which are not directly caused by ground shaking, approximately 70% may be attributed to the landslides. And with this background, and there are so many other studies which have shown that the impact of seismically induced landslides are long-term in nature, which manifest in indirect socioeconomic losses. And with this background, it is very important that we realize that the whole Himalayan region is very, very vulnerable to the seismically induced landslides. And to assess the current scenario, we must consider the potential earthquakes that may cause the landslides in that particular region. However, there are so many challenges when we talk about seismically induced landslide mapping because different statistical methods which are widely used for landslide susceptibility zonation, like the ones which are very common, they do not incorporate seismic factor because they are mostly concerned about the preparatory causes. And this has been ascribed to the rarity of an earthquake event. And because since earthquakes, the large scale earthquakes are so rare, it is difficult to generate a database where we can have a earthquake induced landslide inventory. This greatly alters the use of AI-based methods, which is nowadays the practice where we use artificial intelligence or machine learning methods to actually find out what will be the co-system displacements. Then, what we have been traditionally doing that we are trying to find out, we are trying to correlate the distance, magnitude, frequency of particular earthquake, and we try to find out what is that particular co-seismic landslide, and we try to extrapolate those data to the other region. However, this is limited to the terrain investigated and the particular ground models. So one particular earthquake which is originated even in Himalaya, we cannot extrapolate the same data to the other regions because they will have the particular attributes, the frequency content, the duration, the amplitude, all of them will be completely different. So one of the alternative would be that we based on geotechnical exploration and we model with finite element models. However, it is quite complex and robust analytical process, and we are stuck with the site specific nature that for a particular terrain only one or two we can characterize because that will require a lot of time and energy. So finally, we need careful examination before selecting which particular earthquake attributes we are considering for multi-hazard integration. We can have the amplitude, we can have the frequency content, we can have the duration, and we can have different other parameters, which is an amalgamation of all these matter, all these characteristics. But for a very precisely for a integer for a initial level, we can choose the amplitude prop because we can directly relate it with the force, and that force can actually generate the instability. So we have taken a part of lower Indian Himalaya. We can see that part of Himachal and part of Uttarakhand are covered in this particular area, and we have used analytical hierarchy process, which is a semi-qualitative method which was proposed by SETI in 1980, and it has been widely used for landslide hazard susceptibility zonation for the statistical methods. And we have selected peak ground acceleration at bedrock level for 10% accidents probability in 50 years, which is generated through PSSA. This study area encompasses around 12,350 square feet with more than 15 lakhs population as per the 2011 national census. And we have uh, we have MFT running through it. We have MBT, which is main uh, frontal thrust, main boundary thrust, and we have a part where congregation of MBT, MCT, and MFT. This part particularly, all are present in this study area. And one thing, just by looking into this particular particular landslide distribution, we can see that the landslide distribution is very correlated with the distance and the pattern of MFT and MBT. And in fact, here where all of three merges, MBT, MCT, MFT, MBT, and MCT, MBT, and MFT here, we have a larger swamp of observed landslides. This particular area, we have 16 geological formations, and the most common type of rocks we have come across were sandstone, limestone, shell, slate, dolomite, and we know that this is the very common thing, and we all know that this is what we observe in the Himalayan parts. So we have identified we identified the landslide causative thematic layers or the preparatory landslide causative factors based on our field observations and the past studies. These six particular landslide factors have been used in this study. Although we have used land use, land cover also as a cause of thematic layers, or sorry, cause of landslide preparatory phases, we have not included because there were some discrimination with the results, and most of the land use, land cover were forest area. So we have just discarded that, and we have come with slope angle. This is the dam. This is the dam, and we can see that the area we have again classified it at an interval of 500 meter, which is the common norm in LSU mapping. Then slope angle, slope aspect, drainage Euclidean distance, fault Euclidean distance, road Euclidean distance, lithology, and land use land cover. Although land use land cover, we are not very much, we have seen the effect of LC here. Then we have prepared the observed landslide inventory based on list data, and which is again verified with Google Earth imagery. And finally, at select points, we have actually done the ground truthing. And this is the Mansa Devi landslide. We can see here the lots of landslide and slope failures initiated at these parts. And then this is what we have observed from list data. And this is what we have observed from the Google Earth imageries. And from those three, we amalgamate to prepare a landslide inventory where we have identified 1062 observed landslide in that particular area. However, this distribution map, we did not have data on the date of the failure, and that works as a major hindrance throughout the work. We try to find out as much information as possible. However, there is no such inventory which indicates whether these are co-seismic or rainfall induced. So we have simply taken it to be the observed landslide, and we have given a weightage there. Now, we have defined a term, and this term was actually not defined by us, it was defined by Kanun Goyan Sarkar in 1995, which we call the landslide potential index. And landslide potential index is the particular, if we take the rank and the weight of particular thematic layer and the subsequent classes, and if you numerically integrate them, then we can find out what is the landslide potential index for each pixel, and we can map it very easily in a GIS environment. So based on our observation and the detailed field study, we come across with this particular ranks. The rank assigned are that highest rank has been assigned to the slope angle, followed by geology, then fault Euclidean distance, elevation, drainage Euclidean distance, road Euclidean distance, and slope aspect. Now, slope aspect, you can see that we are giving a weightage of 2. That means the aspect effect in this particular model has been considered to be very low. However, the angle effect, where if the slope is more than 35 degree or if the slope is more than 45 degree, then we give a very high weightage. Now, based on that, we have applied the principles of an analytical hierarchy process, and we find out what is consistency index and what is consistency ratio, and we have found out that these are the eigenvectors which are used for our which will give us the relative weightage, and we can see that slope angle is given a weightage of 35.5%, whereas the slope aspect is given a weightage of 2.6%. Now, the same process has been repeated by the thematic sublayers. When I am showing the results for one particular thematic layer, the slope angle, which is, we have again classified the slope angle class in 15 degree, 15 to 25, 25 to 35, 35 to 45, and greater than 45. And where you can see that the weightage given will give me the final value, and this is correctly correlated with the physical modes which we understand. Based
Dr. Reddu,
yes, sir.
I think we are running out of time. Can you please?
Yeah, I will complete in 2 minutes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So this is what we have come across. This is the first part where we have not considered the earthquakes, and we have come with this particular map where we have seen that our 7% of the total area comes as the landslide hazard zone of very high susceptibility, and another 23, so total 30% of area falls under zone of high to very high hazard. And this is what we have find out, that this model can be implemented with 85% of confidence level. So then we go with the seismotectonic model, and I'm not going to discuss much about it. And we have found out that for our 10% earthquake probability, accidents probability, we have a maximum earthquake of maximum PJ of 0.197 G, and this has again been classified, and we have again processed the same. We have followed the same process to find out what are my eigenvalue vectors. And then we come across with the seismic LPI, which will give me the landslide potential index under seismic condition, which is a numerical integration or numerical solution of the preparatory causes, and then this is what I will get as my seismic causes. Now we have assumed that considering the high Himalayan seismicity, it can have an assignment of rank 8, and then again we solve the matrix and we find out that our assumptions are within the limit, and this is what we have got after introduction of the seismic forces. Now we can compare these two, and we have found some very interesting facts here, that the seismic, once we incorporate the seismic factor, the landslide potential, the maximum landslide potential increases by 34.6%, and the minimum one again deviates by 18.3% respectively. Now, this means that while my preparatory causes remains my more or less in controlling factors, when and if and when a big earthquake occurs, then there will be tremendous and widespread landslides or co-seismic landslides, which is expected in this particular area. These results is again shown by the shifting of the zones, and now 51% of my study area falls under the zone of very high hazard, which was earlier only 7%. So this, with these two, we have understood that when there is an earthquake, when we consider the seismic forces, there will be a paradigm shift of the hazard zonation from very low to very high. That means zones which are now we have marked as very low zone, they can be actually moved to moderately susceptible zone or even high zones if we consider earthquake magnitude. And this is what needs to be considered when we actually implement the government policy and infrastructure development. So one of the find out that integration of scenario earthquake with the preparatory factors will increase the landslide potential of the area by 35%, and there are there are chances that whatever hazard map we are now preparing and or we are now following for the different governmental or institutional policies, that needs to be changed again. So I would like to thank you everyone for your time, and I would like to answer any question pertaining to my topic. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Ridu. It was a very nice presentation indeed.
Thank you,
Because
sir.
talking about landslide will always be fascinating. It's never-ending discussions, and the work you have carried out is very interesting and very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for such a wonderful presentation. And now I'm just checking if you have any queries for it or question to be answered. And yeah, we don't have any questions. Ravi sir actually got you have completed all the 4 technical papers.
Yeah. So you can conclude the session.
Yeah, I think Teen Singh sir is there. I think Teen Singh sir. So yeah, and thank you everyone for attending the sessions. And I think we had such a variety of papers and a special lecture by Professor Priyanka Ghosh, and followed by 4 different topics of papers that are discussed by Dr. Deepankana Bhattacharjee, and on actually scientific modeling, and by Dr. Manish V. Shah on the earth pressure distribution and displacements, and the third talk by Dr. Sunil Khuntia on seismic pullover capacity of strike plates, and then the last one integrating landslide and seismic hazards. Both actually were distinct and unique on their own merits, and we had a very good session altogether. So with due permission from Chair, I think now we can conclude the session.
Okay, thank you.